But what are some important currencies that you try to get? I know there's the milk scene. I know there's the fear topic. You know, there is the patient side where you're saying 51 days is, you know, the Waco siege, 120 days was the one with Japan, 85 days, Montana siege. What are some currencies you use to have leverage when you negotiate with the hostage?
I think the biggest goal that you try to achieve is a level of trust. People will not surrender, they won't cooperate, they won't agree to something unless they have a certain level of trust. Now, it takes a little bit of time to build that, and there's various levels of trust. But that's what we're really striving for. The other thing I should say, based on your question, we really have to look at what negotiators do in kind of two categories. One is an actual hostage taking, and you have to understand this is more like business, because in a hostage taking, the person has a clear cut goal in mind. They want something they can't get on their own. Maybe it's escape, maybe it's money, maybe it's a release from prison, whatever it might be. They can't do it on their own, so they hold the hostage and threaten to harm the hostage unless the authorities give them what they want. The good news on that story is they need us, the police, to do what they want. So it sets up a scenario for quid pro quo bargaining. Well, we can do this, but you have to do that. And if you keep in mind that the person is there primarily to get their demands met and not to kill, that gives us a powerful advantage. And usually with the passage of time, they hold the hostage, they feel initially empowered and in control. And then when time passes and they don't get us to jump every time they snap their fingers, and we don't roll over and give them everything they want without them giving us something, you know, they finally come to the point of view saying, well, I guess I'm not going to get what I want. You know, there's an old story about a hijacking in New York, you know, way back in the 70s, and the guy wanted to fly to Europe. And in part of his discussions with the negotiators, he said, I want, next time you come out here, bring me a hot cup of coffee with cream and 2 sugars. You know, an hour later, the coffee comes out and it's cold and there's no sugar and there's no cream. And the guy surrenders about 20 minutes later. And they said, well, what was it that made you surrender? And he said, well, I figured if I couldn't get a decent cup of coffee, this other stuff wasn't going to work out. You know, and it's sort of a humorous way to look at kind of how the expectations got lowered and the reality set in that, hey, you're not the big kahuna. You don't just say you want something and it's going to happen. You got to go through us. Now, those incidents that I just described is only about 10% really of what we do. Most police officers will never work a legitimate hostage situation. What they're working, 90%, is emotionally driven situations where the victim, not really a hostage, the victim and the person holding them, you know, have a pre-existing relationship. It's a employee-employer, it's a boyfriend-girlfriend, husband-wife, you know, neighbor, whatever it might be. They have a history that is tense, problematic, and confrontational that has erupted into this event. And those are the cases where the person really doesn't know how to get out of what they got into. They just are expressing their emotions. And our job in those cases is not so much to make a deal, but to lower their emotional levels, get them to a point where they're thinking a little more clearly and a little more rationally, and realizing that anything violent that they do is just self-defeating and self-destructive. And we're pretty successful at those as well. But I will tell you, when there is loss of life, it's in those situations, not a hostage situation.
Interesting.